Shalom, welcome. I'm Rabbi Robin Frisch, and this is the Mazel Pups podcast. If you're Jewish or Jewish, however you define that, and you love dogs, then this is the podcast for you. Today's guest is Ellis Weiner, and this is someone I've wanted to speak with since I first read his book, Yiddish with Dick and Jane, many years ago, although I had no excuse to talk to him at the time. And then even more so in the last few years when I read How to Raise a Jewish Dog, which is one of the few books that feels relevant to what I'm doing at Mazel Pups. And on top of that, several of the dog Instagram accounts that I follow in recent months have posted pictures of their dogs with this book, How to Raise a Jewish Dog. So it's just quite an honor, Ellis, to have you here. Now that I have a podcast, I had a reason to reach out to you. And best of all, not only do I get to talk to you, but all of our listeners, everyone who's here, also gets to hear what you have to say as well. And before we get to talking about your books and about you and your dogs and other aspects of your life and work, we're going to start with a very brief lightning round. So if you're ready, I want to ask you, number one, and I certainly know the answer to this because I just saw Jeff in the background, but do you currently have a dog?
I currently have a dog. He was rescued. His name is Jeff. He's a mutt. Maybe he's a bit of a chow and a pit bull. We have no idea.
Number two is, can you share a fun fact or two about your dog, Jeff?
Yes, he's very smart, and his job, like that of most dogs, is to guard the house and to guard me. Bark at Amazon trucks, FedEx trucks, UPS trucks, the mailman, people walking up and down the street, and sometimes at nothing. So I feel very safe.
It's really too bad that you're on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast, because he and my dog, Bo, could be best friends. That's exactly what he spends the day doing. And my final question in our lightning round is, what do you like most about Judaism?
A combination of the culture of learning and respect for education, and because Jews have always been in the minority, the attitude of irony and humor. I've said more than once that it's really rare to meet someone with absolutely no sense of humor, but you do meet people who just don't get it a lot of the time. I mean, I've been a humorist since 1976, and those are the people who are funny. That's who I feel the most comfortable with. And I think that's one of the reasons.
It's interesting to me that in your writing experience, you've written some books and articles alone, and in others you've had partners. Yeah. The two that are particular interest to me are Yiddish with Dick and Jane, and then, of course, How to Raise a Jewish Dog, both of which you had a partner who was Barbara Davilman, your wife, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. So I'm curious what the process was like, because it is your wife. How do you maintain? I always say, my husband's also a rabbi. I love him to death. I would never want to work with him. We know that would not be good for our relationship, whereas other couples do. So I'm curious how that worked when you would shift from just regular married life to, okay, now we're going to sit down and write. And did you do it together and all the other things that go with that?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics, because Barbara was mainly a script writer, and she wrote for sitcoms, and then she was a writer producer for 1 million reality TV shows, which consists of getting 40 hours of footage and boiling it down into a 44-minute story. Whereas I'm a prose writer. So our partnership worked very nicely, because we would conceive of the books together and maybe come up with the outline together. But then I would write at the computer all the first drafts, print them out, give them to her, and she would have a Sharpie, and she would sit in bed and go, no, this is good, no. And our editor used to refer to that as her exerting her civilizing influence. Because, and I realized he was right, because if left to my own devices, I can have a tendency to be too abstract and to follow a joke into where the only person who would be interested in it would be me. So she would rein me in that respect. And that worked great. And we always had the agreement that if either one of us insisted on something, that's what it would be. And we hardly ever had to invoke that.
So it wasn't causing marital conflict when you had
Oh my
disagreements
God,
about the book.
never. No, no. Um, because I really couldn't do what she could do, and she really couldn't do what I could do. And we both knew it. So it was a pleasure. And occasionally I worked on scripts with her, but mostly not.
So,
Um,
so what made you? I mean, it's still humor, and it's a similar type of humor, but it's a whole different subject to go from everything you've done to, first Yiddish with Dick and Jane. I don't know exactly when you wrote it, but it was published in 2004, and then 2007 published How to Raise a Jewish Dog. What made you do that switch to a little bit different genre? I guess the same genre, but the Jewish emphasis or the Jewish humor in there.
One thing we both learned, Barbara and I each had what I would describe as difficult mothers. She grew up in Great Neck, New York, and I grew up in the suburbs of Baltimore. Um, and at the time, our mothers stayed at home and the fathers went to
Mm-hmm.
work. So they were our main influences. um, and she learned, sort of civilian Yiddish from her mother, different terms, and I learned from mine. And the origin of Dick and Jane was, and this is kind of fitting. I worked in New York with a guy named Mark Saltzman. He won a lot of Emmys writing for Sesame Street, and we'd worked on children's TV together. And then one year he just said, "I'm moving to LA," and he did. And by sheer coincidence, he became one of Barbara's best friends. They met, had nothing to do with me. So when she and I started going out, she, emailed him, "I'm seeing this guy named Ellis." And as soon as she hit send, the phone rang and he called her and he said, "I know Ellis." So he became a playwright, and she and I attended a performance of one of his plays in Laguna Niguel, which is about an hour and a half south of here on the beach. So we got to Laguna a couple hours early, and I said, "All right, we can eat lunch, but we're still going to have some time to kill before the performance. What'll we do?" I said, "Well, we'll schmai around Laguna." And she said, "We'll spazier around Laguna." And I'd never heard that word, and they mean the same thing. So I said, "All right, use it in a sentence." And either she said or I said, "Dick likes to spazier. See Dick spazier." And then after the play, we're driving back to LA, where we both lived together. And I said, "That's a book,
Mm.
Dick and Jane with Yiddish." And the first version that we wrote, our agent sent it out, and it got rejected by about 8 or 9 publishers. And one of them gave us a very useful note. They said, "It's not about anything weighty enough. It's not about something serious enough." So we rewrote it, and our agent sent it to Terry at Little Brown, and he said, "Absolutely." And we were off and running. Um, After that, we did the one that you don't have, which is called Yiddish with George and Laura, about the Bushes, and that did not sell. And in retrospect, we decided that everybody was tired of them, including us. And then, I can tell you about the origin of Jewish Dog. First of all, Barbara loved dogs. She eventually founded an organization that rescued Rhodesian Ridgebacks. And I grew up, my sister and I were both allergic to dogs, but we had one. And then I had one when I was living in Pennsylvania when I met her. So I moved to LA to be with her and brought my dog. And we lived with conditional, unconditional love, with catastrophizing and fearing the worst, and so on and so forth. And that's what we did. And I must say, we published 7 books together, and this is our favorite one. Our friend Susan Bernstein, who did the photos in the book, has gone on to become a tremendous artistic photographer. But to make a living, she was also, photographer for hire. She was a pleasure to work with. Her assistant was a pleasure. Our friends lent us their dogs to be, co-stars in the book. As we say, it sold through. We got back our advance. I'm still getting royalties. So it was a complete pleasure, start to finish.
what amazes me, and I do not know much about the publishing industry, but I do know people have very short attention spans. So the fact that I walk into the Jewish Museum in Philadelphia and I see this book is still there for sale, to me seems pretty amazing. That, here we are 15 plus years later, and this book is still around, and that people are, I think also now there's been, I certainly notice on Instagram, as I mentioned, like people are dressing up their dogs with Jewish stars. And, if you look at Mazel Pups on Instagram, we have lots of pictures, because my dogs aren't the posing type, of everyone else's dogs in their kippah and ready for Shabbat. And, it's definitely, there's a trend there now. And so it makes sense that they're taking pictures of their dogs with this book and they're buying this book. But a question I have for you, and it's interesting, and it of course makes sense that this is based on your experience growing up Jewish at a period in time, is, are you at all concerned that there are negative Jewish stereotypes?
We were never worried about it because we knew we were writing from our own historical truths. Our mothers were both very narcissistic. In ways that, of course, when you're 10, 11, 12, 13, you don't know.
Sure.
You're not equipped to know. And if someone points it out, you have no frame of reference. Mark Salzman, the guy whose play we went to when we first thought of Dick and Jane, says that he would watch sitcoms on TV and say, well, but where's the mother yelling at the kids all the time? We have never, no one's ever broached that subject to me. And this has been around for 17 years, this book. It's a valid topic, but in terms of Jewish dogma, no one's ever said that, and now I'm wondering why not. Maybe because, well, actually you did though, and it's a good question. I was going to say, because we're writing about dogs. Well, but still, all I can say is no, it's never been an issue.
And I think I know the answer to this question, because it was written obviously about yours and Barbara's experience, which I'm not sure matters, if you grew up 20, 30 years later, if it would have been any different. But if you were to write the book today, is there anything you would do differently?
I can't say. I think it would be different. I think mothers today are more enlightened than our mothers were.
So it'd be harder to write, probably.
Well, it would never occur to us. It would be harder to write. That's true. And if we took the same premise, and if we'd been raised by healthier women, first we wouldn't have been as funny, maybe, as people, and there was less to complain about, and it wouldn't have been as good. And also wouldn't have been published, because it's very hard to get humor books published these days because of the internet.
Interesting.
So thank God, sort of, for what happened.
Although it does still appear to be appealing to a younger generation who grew up with different parents.
But I'm glad to see it. I encourage everyone to buy 10 copies each.
So, Ellis, what are you working on these days?
These days, I'm working as a ghostwriter, both for an agency in New York, but also on a freelance basis. And I've had clients from both directions. I've edited people's novels. I've edited people's memoirs. I've sat down with people and encouraged them to tell me their story, which I record, transcribe, and then I write up. I'm in touch with somebody in Ukraine right now. He'll want to do the same thing. And I'm a good choice for that, and it's satisfying to me because I've spent half a lifetime writing parodies, which means adopting other people's voices. So I've become very good at that. And I can write, your book or his book in your voice or his voice, and not just in my own. And it may not be as fun as some things I wrote for National Lampoon, but it is satisfying. Like I say, it's there's a line in The Ghostwriter by Philip Roth. It's about Nathan Zuckerman, who's the the author's stand-in, visiting a guy named Eli Lanoff, who I think may be based on Bernard Malamud. And Long enough at one point talks about his writing routine, and he says that if he doesn't write on a given day, he feels a sense of waste.
Hmm.
And I hate to say it, but I feel the same way. There's something completing about even writing somebody's crazy theory about the English language or somebody's not so interesting memoir. There's something satisfying about writing something that one likes when it's done. So I still like it. And then of course, there's what Joan Didion said, which is, I never know what I think about something until I write about it, which is also true for me. And I tell these clients, and it's really proved true with two of them over the past year, who start out thinking they know what their story is. I say, when we get into this, you're going to realize things both intellectually and emotionally that you are not expecting, for better and for worse. Because it's a kind of therapeutic engagement. And if I ask, remotely the right questions, stuff will come out and stuff will come out. And like I say, I'm working with two people now, two different clients, for whom that is obviously true. And they both say it. They both say you're right.
Well, I want to take things a little less deep. Of what you said is really powerful, and just the process of writing and the effect it has on you and on the people you've worked with. And just want to conclude with a question about Jeff. When you're writing, it's a little bit different, but for me, I work virtually. I'm in front of Zoom a lot of the day, or just sitting at my desk, and I find the fact that I have to walk my dogs is really healthy, because otherwise, not just the getting up and getting outside even, but just the getting my head away from a computer.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if Jeff plays a role in taking you away from your writing that's good or challenging for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's even better than that. He doesn't take me away from my running, but he takes me away from the computer. So in fact, when we're done here, I'm going to take him for the morning walk. And I always know that I can solve writing problems by getting out of the house and walking the dog. In 2010, I wrote an operetta called HMO Pinafore. And I took like 26 Gilbert and Sullivan songs, and rewrote the lyrics to them, and then wrote a play about a health insurance company. And I love writing lyrics, but the challenges can be very specific, and I quickly discovered that if I had a problem, the last place I'll be able to solve it is sitting at the computer and trying to solve it. This was before I knew Jeff, but we had dogs, and it was time to walk one of the Ridgebacks. Consistently, as soon as I left the house, within the first minute, not only would I solve the problem, but it would be obvious, and it would be better than anything I could have thought of otherwise. And I knew I could depend on that. So yeah, it's a great, and it's good for my health.
Right.
So, and it's good for the dog's health. So there's no downside.
So I think he should get credit on all future things that you write.
That's true. If you want to be his agent, I respect that. Yeah. We have a list of dogs who are no longer in the front of Jewish Dog, who are no longer with us. The book is dedicated to them.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah.
I see a lot, on Instagram, and talk to people how, they are with us for only a portion of our life typically, but for all of their life. And, right. The power that we have to really make that a meaningful and full life for them, and a happy life.
And when it's over, it's terrible. And we get over it, we do it again.
Yeah. I do know people who, after they've had a dog, say, I can't do it again. But usually within 2 years, they have another one.
Oh, that, right.
Because it's so painful to lose it. But then.
No, I've been, I'm not to speaking of, I've been through that because, when Barbara rescued Ridgebacks, we had a constant parade of fosters and rescues coming in and out. Some we kept, some we adopted out. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm always in awe of people who do fostering or who train service dogs and guide dogs, and you become attached, and you know you're doing it to help them, but it's still got to be very hard.
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. As I said, I've known about you for years, so I'm glad I had an excuse to reach out to you, and it was wonderful to talk to you. And have a wonderful day, and I hope you and Jeff have a good walk.
Thanks, Robin. You too. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Hello, shalom, friends. I'm Bo, one of Rabbi Robin's dogs and our original Mazel Pup. If you enjoyed today's podcast, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a pause and 5-star rating, and follow us on social media. Thanks for listening.